Haribol, everyone. Hare Krishna. Welcome to class 15 or so of Bhagavad Gita. We're going to explore the 13th chapter today. Nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. Any announcements or anything before we go into Kirtan? I guess next week is Kelly and I are going to be in Hawaii. So my plan is 2 weeks. My plan is to continue with the Bhagavad Gita, so I'll just tune in from what'll be afternoon, but it's doable. We'll just have it for the same time. And at least for the first week, Kelly won't be available, but the show will go on. And
Can you believe that?
Somehow we'll make it without her. If the computer explodes, we know it's because our tech lady isn't here.
Yeah, and that you guys can still come here in person if you want for darshan and to do the Gita group. It doesn't matter that we're not here. Yeah.
We don't stop it for anything, except for Halloween.
Except for
the ultimate Hare Krishna holiday.
Yeah. And then I know you can't hear me. I'm moving through a cold, the other end of a cold lung situation, and we did a 12-hour kirtan, which many of you were at or tuned into, but for that reason, I'm not going to lead kirtan tonight. I'm going to rest my voice. I've been instructed. Even my two in the room, Amy was like, "You need to rest your voice." So Shami is going to lead us in kirtan and right into class. Even better.
Yep. Okay.
Mission value.
First mantra is glorifying our teachers and offering respect to them, to whom we're actually indebted to approach Krishna, to approach Bhagavad Gita in the right way and with their support. In fact, the Guru is mentioned, the spiritual teachers are mentioned in the 8th or 9th verse of this chapter. We'll discuss more, but we'll start with that. And glorify the Panchtattva, Lord Chaitanya and his 4 associates, and chant Hare Krishna and Kirtan. The best way to purify the heart and open it. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripa Santupya Evacha Patitanam Pavanepyo Vaishnavepyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Howdy Bol, everyone. Great to be with you all. Just a couple of days after our 12-hour kirtan in this very room. And that was amazing. And we're starting the last third of the Bhagavad Gita. We're 2/3 of the way there. Amazing. So, as I always like to do, let's take a little bit of reflection time just to refresh us on where we are. We read the 12th chapter in 2 parts. The first part, Krishna answers Arjuna's question about what's a better way to make progress, to deal with your impersonal feature after he sees the universe, or to deal with you personally. And Krishna answers very clearly, personal is better because you're a person. It'll be more difficult for you to do the other thing. And then he offers the yoga ladder, so we can take reflections on that. Or he talks about in the last half of the chapter the qualities of the advancing devotee that please him, that are recognizable in advanced devotees, that we can look for, and we can look for in ourselves. So there's a lot of different kinds of characteristics and mentalities, the psychology, the selflessness, the equanimity of an advancing devotee, and how all those are in relationship to their being a devotee. Actually, it's not that we're cultivating these qualities to be perfect for our own self. Like, look at me, I'm the greatest. There's no like, it's not, we're not turning that into currency. We're not doing it for our own personal profit. It's for Krishna's pleasure because it's about a relationship. So yeah, any comments or questions, reflections? Let's take at least a couple of those so we know kind of where we're at, or what touched people, what stuck out from the last couple of weeks. Chapter 12. Leanne has her hand raised. Go ahead, Leanne.
Haribol.
Haribol.
I really enjoyed hearing about having a fixed axis and making Krishna your anchor and your center. And many times, like when I hear certain little pieces of information, I think I always go back to when I was working with kids, and I still do here and there. And you always, have to redirect them constantly to something because their attention's getting taken away from that one thing that they're working on. So I'm using that as an example too in my head every time that you're talking about certain things, and especially this, because it was like that's what happens. So
Yeah,
gently you bring them back. So
thank you. That's highly relatable for everyone. Yes, Samantha was also saying that was also the axis was a sticking point for me too. Yeah, thank you. I when I first started coming to bhakti programs and I was introduced to japa meditation. Japa is like, personal practice of chanting the Maha Mantra, just like we do it with other people in kirtan with music. If you take the music away, the mantra is just as powerful, but then you don't have the other people with you and you don't have the music to support it. It's just you and Krishna's name, and so the mind can wander. And the way it was described to me is like, it's exactly like dealing with a child, just like you said. If the child is like very energetic, in fact, Krishna said in the 6th chapter, the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. And so if a child was like really restless, very turbulent, very stubborn, obstinate, very strong, a little wild, then you can imagine they're jumping from thing to thing. The mind is like that. And so you can't actually be successful with a child if you kind of like try to just be a disciplinarian all the time. So it's like they're going to play with something. They're going to get their hands and their mind, their energy into something. So the mind's like that. So the point is, like, as you said, gently bring it back. Say, okay, I know you want to look at our laundry list of things to do. I know you want to think about the groceries. I understand you want to replay that social interaction we just had. It's okay. Thank you for that offer of going over that. What we're going to do is we're going to actually chant Hare Krishna right now. And later we can look at our to-do list. And that social interaction is totally fine. That's already been dealt with. It's not even a thing. And so we're not going to sit here and magnify it. It's like, just like, yeah, no, not so much right now, over here. And so it's an excellent analogy. It's a very common one because the mind is especially in the untrained state, all over the universe, like a child, and it's got more power than any child we know. It can jump from continent to continent like that. It's like all of a sudden I'm in Europe, I'm in Asia, then I'm in a magical fantasy world. It's the mind's power. So yeah, being gentle and patiently guiding it. And that axis point of keeping Krishna in the center, I think the context what I was talking about maybe was because Krishna is talking in the yoga ladder about, so, if you can't always think of me, then practice bhakti, practice the rules and regulations of bhakti and develop a desire for me. And that means having a daily practice, which is a point that came up earlier in the Bhagavad Gita of, if you can't literally always chant Hare Krishna, at least do it every day. Do something every day, because anything you do every day, you take seriously. Like if I didn't eat today, I would take that very seriously, because whatever you really value, you do it every day. And so if you have a daily practice, it's like, I'm not going to go under that. That's my minimum. I can go over it, do that. But if it's a tough day or I'm like not feeling it, I'll still hit my minimum. That's what it means to keep Krishna in the center. It's like, I don't let my mind call the shots of like whether I will or I won't do the practice. I will do this. It's my anchor. And I will, like maybe I'll offer my meals or whatever my basic standard of devotional practice and service is. And by doing that, you're touching your bases, as they say. You're just making sure that you're staying in touch with Krishna, and you can always do more. Maybe you'll have a 12-hour kirtan or a couple-hour kirtan or whatever. Maybe not, but at least you hit your manageable daily thing, and that's keeping yourself in orbit of Krishna. Otherwise, we tend to spin off into la la land. We're in orbit of like CNN and the Christmas spending season, the latest fad, gadgetry, whatever, iPhone 97. And it's like, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something else to keep in the middle. So as long as you work to keep Krishna in the middle, it's like, yeah, you can have an iPhone and you can do all these other things. It's like, that's fine, but it's all in relationship to Krishna. And so you tend not to spin out and waste your time and energy. Glad that helped. Any other?
Yeah,
Kelly?
on top of what you were just saying, we're speaking about in response to 12, 15, and 16, about not needing like perfect circumstances to do your sadhana and to do your practice. Especially in 12, 15, he by whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety is very dear to me. And we were talking about how that's someone who is drama free.
Yeah.
Right. And that I'm not putting myself as the victim or blaming anybody else. Right. And
Yeah.
again, to that point where that's when you said don't be the diva. And I spelled it instead of deva, but don't be the diva. Right. And that I think is a really important and helpful reminder. And it's really common, like I guess from my own experience, to like get caught in my own experience.
Yeah.
And then when I get caught in my own experience, that's when like drama ensues. Right. So I found that really helpful to contemplate.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, baseline level is like not being interested in creating drama and savoring it. And then after that, you realize like, well, whether I want to create it or not, there's going to be drama in the world anyway. And not becoming the enemy of your enemy, like not getting sucked into that. In fact, in other places, it's described that one of the characteristics of a devotee is that they have no enemies. Doesn't mean that no one dislikes you or, I mean, like Jesus Christ is a great devotee and they crucified him for it. You take chances being a devotee sometimes, and that doesn't mean you always make friends, but you don't actually have any enemies on your terms. Like you have nothing against anyone. So the idea of like not buying into the drama of the world and just being steady. So Krishna is pointing out in that verse 12:15 that no matter what other people do, you keep me in the middle. No matter like what the world, and no one is like thrown off by your thing. You're not like pushing other people around and throwing your weight around. It's like I'm just here for Krishna. I'm not here to like play any of those games.
Right. And then that also really I've had conversations with different people about like how that also plays into the yoga ladder that we've talked about, of like, okay, there's the gold standard to not be so affected, but also I'm not at the highest standard,
Right.
and I am affected, and that's also okay. Not, and you said like, don't go into the shame spiral
Right.
around that, but to like honor where you are and ask for help and guidance, and know that I'm doing my sadhana every day to help me get to a place where I could be.
Yeah, non-reactive and
Yeah.
etc. Definitely. Yeah, we had a nice conversation around that whole thing of these signposts are there in Bhagavad Gita and other books so that we can know where we're going, but not so we can like just end up criticizing ourselves for not being there yet. You know, it's good to know the goal. Otherwise, if you don't know the goal, then you're already perfect. Because the mind will be like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm there. But it's like, if you really look at it, no, I still, we still react to things. We're still like not completely there, but it's good to know that we can get there, and that's what that looks like. And okay, so, what am I doing to take steps towards that? At the same time, like not beating myself up, not getting stuck in shame because of the gap I mentioned, because of the gap between where I am and where we're going. Ultimately, the thing in common between all those different verses is that Krishna says they're qualities of my devotee. So if we're trying to practice devotional service, then we're in the game, we're his devotee. And that's the most important thing, which is going to come up again in this chapter again. That I mean, how many times has it been now? That bhakti is the central point. So thank you.
One of the blessings, I don't know if this happens to other people, it was like, you do a reading, we go through it. The last time I watched the video, and then like my teenager shows me it.
Can you all hear?
Can you hear her?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
And that came in like very strong, right as ending vacation. We were in the Bahamas and it was lovely, and I chanted everywhere I went just because you had given me that gift of like, maybe nobody's chanted there before, and I was like, okay, we're gonna do it.
Wow.
So that was awesome. And but she, my daughter, she's like a teenager going through the things, and she was able to witness me in the Bahamas having my time to myself, practicing my japa, my meditation, because I would just like go out to the beach and be like, don't everybody just leave me alone, I'm just gonna go out there and do anything. And it was great because my mother also got to witness that too. But then when she didn't get what she wanted, she threw the daggers, as the teenagers do. Please don't do that.
Yeah, listen closely.
And Dad, I'm here for you. Thank you. I'm here for you.
It happens already.
Yeah. Oh, it hurts, man. But what I realized as the daggers were being thrown at me, like she was like, and I see you're trying to do all this om shit. And like throwing what she said, I just got to this, I don't know what happened, like peace just came over me, that like this crazy feeling of peace, of like, you've got this. And I probably did something that you're not supposed to do, but I started chanting while she was spewing at me, so that I could just remember who I was in this moment, and it all worked out. She spewed the daggers, it hurt. I did have some tears privately about it. I'm like, when does this end? In the 20s, I know. Like, and she turned around and she actually texted me today and said, I have been listening to you, and everything does work out the way that it's supposed to. It was days late. Is it days later? Days later. I like feels like weeks later. Sunday, this big dagger throwing happened. Here we are with this text. And in other times, my anxiety would have rose. Not my voice anymore, because I've worked on that, but my anxiety would have rose. And I'm a checkout person. I'm like, I don't like conflict, so I'm just gonna leave. And I stayed present, for that gift, with her, and I listened to the daggers, and I did not respond as a therapist, which is also my go-to thing with her, of like, I hear what you're saying. I didn't do that. I said, I just listened. And then she was like, and now you're not even responding. And I was like, I just don't even know what to say right now. But I am listening to everything that you're saying. And if you need me to repeat it back, I will, because I could still hear it even though I was chanting. But it was I always leave, like I leave. I'm a ghoster, y'all. Like I'm like, see you later. I'm trying to work on, I am working on that, being more present and like facing the things that are difficult. But it was such a beautiful thing to like come fresh out of that and all these sort of tools and just have it wash over me in that moment.
Wow.
That it wasn't even a thought, it just washed over me. I felt it like, right?
Amazing.
And I also had one other experience, I'll be really quick, with a stingray. And it like brought me to tears because I was still eating fish, but not meat. And then I like had a moment with a stingray, y'all. And then I tried to eat fish later that night at the restaurant and I just started crying. And for a moment I cursed you. I just did.
Oh,
Right. There's been a few times in this journey where I was like, and my husband's like, are you okay? And I was like, I can't stop thinking about the beautiful stingray with his mouth like, hey girl. And then we're eating codfish and I'm just like overwhelmed with grief about it. And so I hated you in that moment and then I loved you back. But so wow, the beautiful moment. And stingrays, y'all, are so cute.
They are.
They have these mouths and they're just like cute.
Yeah.
That was drama
In the
free.
chat we have Eileen says fish are friends, not food. Quoting from Nemo.
Yeah.
Someone told me that fish like don't have feelings, like in the response of me telling them the story that like this happened on my trip. And they're like, oh, you know, my husband told me like fish don't have feelings. I was like, your husband's a liar. And he told you that because he's a fisherman. Because I spent time with the stingray swimming and just hours later had this like huge emotional response.
Well, congratulations on your transformations in communication and you know your diet and everything, and because you're receiving the wisdom that's coming down from Krishna and his devotees is going to serve you because you're not making it up as you go. It's an approved sattvic devotional lifestyle. Thanks for those reflections. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was drama. That was like an example of taking a drama-free approach to verse 12:5. Yeah, 15. That's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fish is the last one to go for me too. I don't know if that's common.
Fish was the last one for me to go
Beef
to.
first and then.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
beef, pork, chicken, then
Fish.
Oh.
Same.
Amazing.
Jai.
All right.
Can we allow Cheryl to introduce herself?
Yeah, let's have a quick introduction from Cheryl. This is your first time here. Great to have you.
How would you say?
Just you can unmute and say hello and like give us, you know,
her name, where she lives, and why she's here.
Yeah, you know where you live and just kind of why you're here in the Bhagavad Gita class.
Well, I have been attending the Wisdom of the Sages Sage group with Kelly for the past few weeks. I was in a different group before that. And Tanya is my sister.
Amazing.
And so I know a handful of you from our Sage group. The rest are new to me. I live in South Jersey, and I'm a retired teacher after 40 years of teaching. I've only been retired, I guess, going on 2 years, almost 2 years, maybe just 2 years. Mother of 3 adult children, 2 of whom live in different states. And my journey with Bhakti is long and interesting because of all of the different branches of everything that I experienced starting as a young child, interested in multiple religions and Eastern religions and that sort of thing. But it all kind of came to ahead, if you will, about a year ago when Tanya and I reconnected and she introduced me to her community. And I was like, what am I waiting for? So here I am.
So great to have you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move into chapter 13. Chapter 13 is called, the translation is Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. So the Sanskrit is Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga, which means the drawing a distinction between matter, nature, matter, and the enjoyer of matter, consciousness, or inanimate and consciousness, in other words. So this is the yoga of connecting to Krishna through developing, sharpening our discernment, so we can understand that we're not actually, like, our self as conscious beings is different than the natural inanimate material world. So there's a lot of like kind of more like left brain kind of discernment, intellectual stuff in this chapter, and we're going to explore some of that. So the first verse, Arjuna says, "My dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field, and the knower of the field, and of object and the object of knowledge." And so Krishna starts describing what these things mean. He says, this body is called the field, and one who knows the body is the knower of the field. Basically, the idea is that for every embodied being, there is, like right there in the term embodied being, it's like we're in a body. So there's the being itself, and there's the body that they're inhabiting. Just like you can drive a car, and when you're driving the car, you can say like, "Oh, I'm making great time," or like, I'm really handling great," or "You hit my car," or "You hit me." You can kind of identify with the car, but actually you're not the same as the car. We know that. So similarly, we're actually inhabiting the vehicle of the body. And so Krishna is using this expression of the field, that which we, act with, or react with, or interact with, and the knower of the field. So think of like when you're experiencing something, let's say right now you're hearing me talk, right? So then there's the sound of my voice, and there's like the part of you that's interpreting those sounds as words and ascribing meaning to them, and just kind of putting the pieces together intellectually. But behind all that, there's an observer. You can observe the hearing of the sound. You can observe the intellectual process of putting those sounds together into ideas. That observer is different than those other things, categorically different. Those other things are different levels of material reality, gross and subtle. So sound vibrations, thoughts, those are all parts of the material world. They're parts of the field. But you are the knower of that field. And you're the knower only of your own field. We are experiencing our own body. We're experiencing our own subtle body, including our memories. We're experiencing our own thoughts. We're not actually directly experiencing other people's thoughts. Sometimes if we have a really refined sense of things, you can, like if you walk into a room and people have been arguing, you can feel, something's, happening here. But it's like an echo. It's not the same. You don't have the same access. But basically we have our view of the universe, and we're observing it. So Krishna is drawing this distinction. So text 3 says, this is an important verse. I'll share it. Kshetrajnang chapi mang vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetrajnayo jnanam yatta jnanam matam mama. O sign of Bharata, or Arjuna, you should understand that I, Krishna, am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So the idea, first of all, is that, okay, there's the knowable, there's the field, and there's us who's observing it. But we have our own little unique perspective on the universe. Like we're all here, and we're all hearing me talk, including myself, but we're all having our unique experience of that from our own vantage point. But Krishna says, I am knowing everyone's field. I'm actually inhabiting everyone's body with them. So in the like metaphysics or the worldview, the view of reality of Bhagavad Gita, we have matter, and so every embodied being has their bodily experience, and we're living in the body actually as a spiritual being, animating it. Like as soon as I leave this body, it'll be a lump of matter, and you'll know it because the light will go out in my eyes and things will go slack, and there's a change. We call that death, or perhaps just unconsciousness temporarily. The consciousness retreats, but there's a difference between an inhabited body and an uninhabited body. But while the soul is there, Krishna is also there. He's actually in the body with us. He's actually side by side with us in everybody's experience. That's the common ground, is that I know my pains and pleasures, you know your pains and pleasures, but we don't necessarily know each other's. We can try and communicate that, but Krishna knows all these things. He's inhabiting everybody's field and experiencing with them as they're going through their material sojourn. He's actually pointing that out, that I'm Sarva Kshetreshu, in all bodies, in all fields, I am also the knower. He doesn't say, I'm the one and the same. I'm with them. He says, like, I'm also, that you're there, and I'm also there with you. And they're there, and I'm also there with them. So, really important point. In fact, I've heard from devotees who had like a dramatic arts background that this is kind of like how, actors, they think, especially when they get into like method acting, is that they try to embody the character they're trying to play. And they try to connect at a heart level with what that character would feel. Basically, to try to connect to Krishna in their heart, to inform them of what this person's experience would be like. It's a form of empathy. It's a form of empathy mediated by Krishna. And then they act that out for the purpose of the art. And so any act of empathy or any act of connection is mediated by Krishna. It's like, I'm trying to understand you. Like you're there looking back at me. There's a living being. It's like, but Krishna's in your heart. Krishna's in my heart. So my attempts to connect with you, these are all mediated by Krishna. He's actually our common unit. That's how we can act on a dramatic stage, or how we can understand and connect with each other. It's not that there's something else that's connecting us. It's actually Krishna. Or that there's nothing connecting us. There is something. There's the most important thing. There's actually everything. It's Krishna in your heart and mind. So very important point. And then he says that to understand this body and the knower of the body, the distinction, this is real knowledge. So sometimes, like, you can go to school for so many things and collect so much different kinds of knowledge. Krishna says here, what real knowledge is. Real knowledge is to know what nature or the field of activities is, who the enjoyer is, and their relationship and distinction. If we don't know that, we can do advanced mathematics and memorize historical and geographical, capital cities and this and that, and talk about art history or whatever, but it's actually superficial. That's all within the realm of just the field of activities. Until we can draw a distinction between the animate soul who's observing these things and the inanimate field, we're not actually in knowledge. So it's a very high standard of knowledge. Does that make sense? So this is why Bhagavad Gita is and its related bhakti texts are taken so seriously, because this is actually real education for a human being. Bunny rabbits and stingrays, they can't come to a Bhagavad Gita class and understand, oh wow, like I'm actually inhabiting this stingray body. They go with the flow of the stingray body, and that's okay for them. But for us to go with the flow is a bit of a waste, because we will go with the flow anyway. The body has its seasons, that's going to happen. But to know that we're actually different from that is a gift that a human being with human consciousness can have. So real education is like, learn your multiplication tables and learn your art history, and your capital of Madagascar is Antananarivo and whatever. Learn that. That's great. You'll do well on Jeopardy, and you'll get a job and so forth. But also know that you're not your body. It's such a simple thing, but it's such a profound thing. You're not part of this world. You're actually distinct from that. Any questions or comments on that so far? We're just 3 verses in, but it's a very deep principle. So pause for a second and make sure it's sitting with us. Okay. Okay. So he continues. Then he starts describing the field of activities. It says in verse 5, that knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in the Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. The reason I'm reading that first is that because even Krishna refers to previous authorities. This is how you understand what's what. You know, like in science too, like you don't just reinvent the wheel every generation. That's the beauty, is if something's strong enough, you just take it. It's like, okay, Isaac Newton discovered that gravity is a thing, and like we work with that now. And so we kind of like, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. That's how science works. It's also how the spiritual science works. Krishna himself is the supreme, and he's also quoting authority and scripture and the writings of the sages and great thinkers that have been established, like Vedanta Sutra and so forth. It's like, we don't have to figure it out. In fact, it's better we don't try. Better we receive what's already been established. Like if you're in science class and your science is like, okay, we're going to talk about physics all semester. So the first thing you need to know is that there's a thing called gravity. And you're like, wait a minute, prove it. And you spend the next hour like challenging them on this. Like you're not going to make any headway. Better to take those axiomatic truths and just accept them for now and see if it works. Turns out gravity is a pretty good working theory, so we use it, you know. But it turns out that, you know, this idea of the field and the knower of the field is actually really excellent stuff. But you're meant to apply it in your life. You don't just like swallow it blindly and swallow it whole. So I think, can I see that I'm actually different than my body? Can I see that I'm observing the material world? And it turns out you can. So just pointing out that Krishna is like very humbly presenting for us, you know, this is how you grow as you receive wisdom that comes down. Because he's like, this is all in the Vedanta Sutra, so I'm just presenting it to you, Arjuna. Meanwhile, Krishna is like the knower of everything, but even he's doing that.
Really briefly, could you just explain anyone the difference between Vedanta and Vedanta?
Yeah, Vedanta Sutra is a rather short series of sutra. Means like small, like thread-like verses, little bite-sized quotes by Vyasadeva, the compiler of the Vedas. And the sutras are very terse, they're very short, and they're like each verse is shorter than a verse in Bhagavad Gita. Like for example, the first verse is Atato Brahma Jignasa. Therefore now is the time to inquire about what is spiritual, about the greatest, about reality. But it's like 6 or 7 words. So because of that, there's a lot of room for interpretation. And basically there's two schools of interpretation, is the impersonalist school and the personalist school. The impersonalist is that like actually everything is completely and exactly one and the same. We're actually all God and he's us and there's no difference. And the personalist school is that we're actually related to the Supreme, but because we're related, there's the relationship. We're actually like the servant and he's the Supreme. And so there's this connection. I'm not actually God, but I'm part and parcel of God. So the Bhakti school is part of that. Is that we actually are part and parcel of the Supreme. We're not fundamentally different, but we're also like a drop of water in the ocean or a spark of fire from the fire. We're not the whole fire, not the whole ocean. And the actual commentary on the Vedanta Sutra by its author is given in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam, which I've quoted from several times, which Prabhupada quotes from 100 times or more in these purports, is the master's study, the follow-up to the Bhagavad Gita. It's 18 cantos of Vyasadeva actually expounding on the activities of Krishna and also the science of the soul. It's translated into English by the students of Srila Prabhupada, and it's an amazing text. We have a copy back there. And it's quoted throughout these purports. So if you want Vedanta Sutra, you can read that. Bhagavatam. Yeah. So in verses 6 and 7, Krishna talks about the material world, aspects of the material world. The 5 great elements, that's earth, water, fire, air, ether. He mentions them in the 7th chapter. False ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses in the mind, the 5 sense objects. It's like the things you can see, hear, touch, feel, and smell. Desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate the life symptoms and convictions, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. These are all aspects of what you can observe in this world. Objects of the senses, the intellectual ideas around them. Like, for example, there is this chair, and this chair has several levels of reality to it. There's the chair that you can see and touch. There's the functional idea of a chair. There's the idea that a chair is made for sitting on. And then there's like the sound chair. These are all aspects of the field. None of those things are actually animate. They're all aspects of the natural world. Once upon a time, there was a living entity in this wood. Presumably not anymore. There's no root system. They've gone on to a different form of life.
When he's saying the 10 senses and the mind, it is then the 5 sense objects and then desire,
Right.
hatred. Those are the 10 senses.
The 10 senses in this worldview, there's the working senses and the knowledge acquiring senses. So here you have the ones that we think of as senses: eyes, ears, tongue, nose, a sense of touch, skin. So the ones that gather the things you can see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. There's also the 5 working senses. So the hands, the legs, the genitals, the tongue, I forget what else, but basically all aspects of our sensory and activity kind of like things, systems, yeah. Prabhupada probably talks about them in the purport.
Legs, hands, penis, and genitals.
Yeah, it's in the purport.
Oh, yeah.
As usual, Srila Prabhupada showing us the way.
Yeah.
It's in the first paragraph of that purport, verses 6 and 7. Yeah. And then there's these 5 verses, 8 through 12, which are really important. I'll read the first one because there's 5. I won't read all of them, and then I'll go bit by bit through the translation because they're all really important points. I'll share them here. So there's a lot in these verses, 8 through 12. Amanitvam adam pitvam himsa kshantir ajivam acharyopasanam shaucham stadium atma vinigraha. And there's 4 other verses. In fact, you might even know one of these words, ahimsa. Anyone ever heard this word ahimsa? What does ahimsa mean?
Non-violence.
Non-violence. Yeah. Buddhism deals a lot with ahimsa. It's also a function of knowledge here. As it turns out, if you're non-violent, it helps you gather knowledge. So the translation begins: humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity. There's a list of different qualities and characteristics. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So what Krishna is doing here is he's actually presenting us the process for gathering knowledge. He's told us what we can know, about the field of activities or about ourselves as a knower of the field. These are all parts of reality. Now he's talking about the process of acquiring knowledge. So the first thing he says, he doesn't say go to a good school. He doesn't say work hard. What's the first thing he says in the translation? It's also the first thing in Sanskrit. Humility. Humility is the beginning of knowledge. Because if you don't admit that you have room to grow, you're not going to. If your cup is already full, you can't put anything else in there. So humility means like, oh wow, there's so much to know. Ever had that experience where you the closer you get to something, the more you're like, I don't know anything. That means you're doing good. If you're playing your instrument, the guitar, the violin, you're like, I got it covered. If you think you're done, you're done. You're just done. You can't grow anymore. But if you love something and you like appreciate it and you're humble about it, then you're like, oh wow. The more I hear about Bhagavad Gita, or the more I do this thing that I love, the more I realize like I'm just scraping the tip of the edge of the iceberg. There's like so much to this. That's the attitude that lets you grow. Because the more you have of that, the more you can actually receive. Because you're taking the low position. It's like water, right? Where does water flow? Does it flow upward? Never. It flows down. Water flows downward. Knowledge flows downward too. So if you take a humble position, knowledge will flow down to you. If you stick your chin up in the air and you think, I got this, how can you receive anything? You're putting yourself above it. You have to put yourself down real low. low as you can get. That's how you get filled up. All the like, classic Karate Kid movies and all that, they're all based on that too. It's like, first Daniel-san has to learn how to be humble, wax on, wax off. Actually, he chants Hare Krishna in that movie, if you remember.
He does.
He does. He takes his wax on, wax off brushes, and he starts pretending they're cartels and says Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's a joke. Look it up. It's on YouTube. But the point is, Mr. Miyagi or all the senseis and like teachers of the world, this is their teaching. First, learn how to be empty, learn how to be humble. Then you can receive knowledge. It works for everything, by the way. Works for karate, works for Bhagavad Gita philosophy, works for your science class. If you go to your science class and you're like, you tell your teacher, I don't know what's up. I'm here to learn. Please help me. And you show up and you're in that first row and you pay attention, like you don't know everything. They're going to pour down that mercy like anything. Like, this person wants to be here. They want to learn. They'll make all kinds of time for you. It just works. So amanitvam, humility. Pridelessness is the second thing. So these are principles of knowledge. So take this with you in your activities. If you want to learn Bhagavad Gita or anything else, begin with humility, pridelessness. Then the next thing is nonviolence. So one of the reasons that we practice an ahimsa, nonviolent diet, is it actually disentangles us from karma. Because when you're entangled with the karma of causing violence, it does a lot of things. It covers the heart, but it also gets in the way of knowledge. If there's violence in your activities, directly or indirectly, it's hard to actually receive because there's interference. So like, how much is the class clown or the like bully going to receive? Not so much, right? Because they're playing their like power games. So don't be playing power games. That's all it is. Simplicity helps. The simpler you are, the simpler your lifestyle, the more room you have. If you're so busy that you're like checking your phone every 2.5 seconds and you got 17 different things on the go and you're learning this and you're learning that, it's like you're already full. You're already complicated. You can't really grow. You've filled your cup up. And the next thing he mentions, out of so many different things, is approach a bona fide spiritual master. Acharya upasanam. Acharya means a teacher. The word literally means somebody who teaches by example. Achar means not just what you say, it means what you do. Somebody who does what they say. They're actually like, it's one thing to talk about the truth, but if you can talk about it and also live it, that makes you an acharya. So Krishna is saying, if you want to know something, be humble, prideless, non-violent, simple, but also find somebody who is willing to share about it and is living the reality you want to be living. If you want to be an excellent musician, find someone who's an excellent musician and who can teach and who will receive you, and be humble with them. And you'll just become naturally advanced by that. In fact, I would say like, there's no aspect of knowledge in your life that doesn't ring true. That's why schools exist. They're places for those with knowledge to congregate with those with less knowledge and transfer the knowledge. That's why cities exist. Why not just live in like little settlements, like all scattered throughout everywhere? Why have a meeting place to exchange ideas and goods, but especially ideas? That's why these things exist. So I have more of something, less of something else, not just corn or, apples that we exchange. We exchange ideas. Find somebody who has an advancement in something, a higher level in something that you want more of, and go to them and receive. And so that the spiritual science works this way too. This has also come up in Bhagavad Gita before. It's going to come up again. It was there in the 4th chapter, and it's even there just in the way that Prabhupada himself is presented, because he quotes always from his teachers. Always he's quoting. In fact, even Krishna was quoting from the Vedanta Sutra. This is humility, and this is receiving from our teachers. So, like I get praise or appreciation for what I'm doing. Literally, my qualification is that I'm repeating what my spiritual masters have taught me, and that I've tried to digest also. Like, I'm not just parroting it, but I've received it, thought about it, considered it, applied it, and then represented it. So this is how the spiritual science works. You receive. And then many of you also have this experience in your own life, like you receive from like me or Kelly or Prabhupada, and then you like mull it over, apply it in your life, and then someone comes to you in your life and you share something. that you've like thought about. You have some realization, even if it's like on a 1,000,000-point scale, you're like at 3, but they're at 0. So you give them like 3 points, and they're like, oh wow, and it actually flows, and the cycle continues. And in that way, you can temporarily occupy the position of a teacher. And it's like that's also available. So does that make sense? These are all universal aspects of knowledge. And these are some of my favorite verses of this chapter because they are so useful for us in our study of Bhagavad Gita, and really in any other study we take up. I guess what I'll do is read the rest of these verses from this bunch here, and then we can pause. So after approaching his bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness helps. The cleaner you are, actually, the simpler your environment is. Like, you know, when you wake up and you're like covered in like old sweat, like you're just kind of itchy. You can't really like be still and peaceful. You're not in sattva. You know, as soon as you're out of the shower and like your pores are open and you're relaxed and your muscles are loose and you're so clean, you just like, you can just be, you know, you can just sit there and be. That's an experience, a little mini experience of sattva. So when you're like peaceful and you're not itching on one level or another, physically or mentally, when you're clean, you haven't filled your head with like advertising jingles and, you know, violent movie scenes and junky trivia and, you know, stuff. You're mentally clean, you're physically clean, you can receive. Makes sense, of course, right? Steadiness, self-control. Self-control helps. If you can't control yourself, then you're going to become violent or prideful or unclean or any of these other things. Become distracted. Unsimple, at least. Renunciation of the objects of sense gratification. So there's a way in which, like, even if we can't deny ourselves all the objects, we have to drink water and eat food. Like we live in a body. But the idea of being aloof from them and not being in love with them and enamored with them. You know, there's the whole thing of eat to live, don't live to eat. Right? We have to eat. We're living in a body that requires biofuel. You have to drink and eat. It's going to happen, right? Don't be a fool and think you can just like, I'm not going to sleep tonight because I read Bhagavad Gita all night. Yeah, you'll crash. That's silly. But don't be like both arms grabbed around the objects of your senses. Like, oh yeah, if I could just eat that, I'll be happy. If I could just sleep like that in that place, go on that vacation, or like touch this beautiful person or whatever, then I'll be happy. It's like that's being enamored with the objects of sense gratification. Being aloof from them is like, yeah, they're there, they're part of life, that's cool, but I'm here for something higher. That's an attitude that gets you knowledge. You see that the people in school even who become very successful, even if they know how to have a good time and go party or whatever, they know that's not the most important thing to them. They actually take their studies really seriously. They don't take the temporary pleasures very seriously. Like they actually, my friends who I know are like very academically successful, they were very focused when they were students. They didn't distract themselves with these lower things that much. Even if they like here and there distracted themselves, like it was measured, it was moderated, because they had a goal and they were going for it. So the world is going to provide you all kinds of lower goals. Like, how about, you know, you just like eat everything at our 30 different item buffet table. That's a goal that your local buffet restaurant can provide for you. But it's like, if you do these kinds of things and you get stuck in that, you can't really reach higher goals. So continuing, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, recognizing that our existential condition of having to be born and die and disease and all that, thank you, it's actually not our natural condition, and wanting a solution to that. That's good, because if you don't see that that's external, that's foreign to the soul, why would you ever be motivated to grow and try to hear about spiritual solutions? It's good to recognize that this world has problems and that being in a material body has problems. And like, I'd love to just, you know, be in that flow zone all the time, but I got to sleep sometimes. And sometimes I get angry. And then sometimes I'm like, I wake up and I'm just tired and I got to shower because I get itchy. Shami was right. You know, if you don't notice that that's going on, then what's the motivation for gathering knowledge anyway? It's like, good to know that we're dealing with that. Then it's not, we'd rather not have to. Freedom from entanglement with children, wife or husband, home, and the rest means not necessarily not having those things. Prabhupada talks about this in the purport. Most of Lord Chaitanya's followers were married. They had husband or wife, they had children. but their life didn't revolve around their spouse and kids. That wasn't the center. Them and their families revolved around Krishna. And there's a difference. And the difference is, one is just kind of like you're stuck in the mud. And the other one is that everything, including your family, becomes a vehicle for advancement. I'm just going through these like note form, but every one of them is so deep. Even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events. That's a theme in Bhagavad Gita. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me. That's in the list. And in fact, our acharyas, our teachers, point out that that's the most important item. If you don't have any of the other items, you're not clean, you're violent, you're not simple, you're not tolerant. You got nothing else going on from this list. If you just practice bhakti, you'll get the other things. So that's the most important one. Aspiring to live in a solitary place. Detachment from the general mass of people. Accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. These are all functions of knowledge. So with that, I think that's a natural kind of pause point. Let's pause here. We got through the first 12 verses of chapter 13. And let's take any comments or questions or reflections, anything that stood out that you heard that was interesting, any analogies I used or anything Prabhupada said, or any questions. We've got a lot of wonderful note takers in this group. Love that.
It's hard to argue with any of it. It's pretty,
Hard to argue with it.
it's pretty, straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. And someone says they have to go. Eileen says, have to go. Appreciate your service. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Aaron says, very dense concepts. Yeah, very dense concepts. There's a lot in each one of these things. Anything in particular that stood out as a very dense concept? Let's just reflect something back.
Learn to be empty.
Learn
so
to be
we can fill up.
Learn to be empty so we can fill up. Yeah. The Karate Kid principle.
I didn't mean to laugh at that.
Learn to be empty so we can fill up.
Like, just
Yes, that's the amanitum adampitvam. Like humility, pridelessness is like ridding ourselves of that external stuff, extraneous stuff, so we can receive. And Caitlin has her hand up. Yes, go ahead.
It's funny because I was about to say something very similar about that specific item about humility. I think for me, then that knowledge flows down to you. Something that I think has come up to me too is that there's also something that I see in myself that it's hard for me to ask for help or ask for what I need. And so like that's something that I think I need to look into to kind of flip that script in my head of being humble enough to allow something to come to me. So, you talked about being able to receive, and I think that that's something that for me, viewing humility in that way is a new thing for me to think about. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a deep thing because actually Arjuna, he starts off in that thing of he's going to go to war. He's the man. He's going to take care of business, and he realizes I can't do this, and he asks for help. And so there's that thing of like we have that moment of choice between, okay, am I just going to try and figure this out on my own? And there's a certain kind of comfort in that. It's like, yeah, I can figure it out. Then I can say I figured it out. Versus receiving is like, which is not exactly passive, but it is like a receptive thing of just like, okay, I'm going to let it come. I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to be open to it. And sometimes it's literally like going to somebody and saying, okay, can you help me with this? And that may or may not be your strong suit. A lot of people, especially highly competent people who like to be in control, can have difficulty relinquishing that and admitting that they are not completely in control, or they couldn't be completely in control in this situation, or that they require or could use external help. And so it sounds like you're seeing some of that, some room for growth, and that's amazing. I'm happy to hear that Bhagavad Gita is relevant for you that way. Yeah, I remember when I first started recognizing in myself that I actually was convinced that I wanted a spiritual teacher. There was that like thing of like, first I was reading the books and I was kind of challenging Prabhupada and stuff. Then I was reading them in more submissive and receptive mode. And then I was like, I guess theoretically I should have my own teacher. And then I was like, oh yeah, but like I really actually have to do this. Because like this makes so much sense to me now. Like I'd be crazy not to actually have a teacher. And so there was like levels of kind of coming to terms with, yeah, I'm actually going to be a student. I'm actually embracing that. I'm actually embracing the learner's role. It's actually really sweet. It's actually a really sweet position to take because you get that's where the mercy flows. Mercy flows downward. If you take it that you're in charge, then you don't get any help. You don't get any mercy. So in fact, when I'm teaching or sharing, I always begin, my best classes begin with me taking shelter of my spiritual teachers and positioning myself properly internally first. If I think I'm giving a good class, it's never actually a very good class. If I'm like positioning myself like I need help here, then I actually end up giving good classes. So it works whether you're on this seat or you're down there. You always want to be in the student role. It's actually the best place to be.
I think what's a little bit difficult for me to think about when reading and going through this is working with the prison population, right? And how a lot of this isn't even accessible to them to survive. Like you're talking about cleanliness, that's taken away.
Yeah.
Right? Like basic needs are taken away. And even like being able to have a spiritual teacher, that's not possible. It's authoritarian, right? It's to be.
I mean, but they can have books.
They can have books, which we're working on.
Yeah.
Right? So they can have books, but even so, the books get taken. If you get in trouble, they get taken and they get ripped up. They're like, it's in the very sense, it's a violent community, right? So this is like some of the work that still I have struggled with, and going back, like, how do you present that when I know that what exists on the inside?
Yeah.
I've been there. Right? So I've worked there for a while. So it's just, we can talk about it because I'm just going to assume that all of us here have a little bit of privilege because we're sitting here. But I work with so many people who do not have that privilege.
Certainly.
And that is difficult. The words are difficult then when I look at it through that lens.
Yeah, and that can be within a prison system or it can be outside the prison system. It can be like there are whole cultures and countries that politically it's very difficult to have these basic things. But remember what our acharyas pointed out was the most important item of that list is sincere devotion. Krishna understands the situations that we're in, and there's a lot that can be made up for. It's like if you only have like this much room to move, but you're using everything in your power to move towards spiritual truth, you get credit because it's an internal process. It's actually not dependent. In other words, otherwise it would be like, because philosophical search for truth is one of the items on the list. So that means like the more intellectual you are, the more spiritually advanced you are. Not necessarily true. You can use that intelligence for anything, including things that are completely diametrically opposed. It's just a tool. So we do want to have social equity. We do want to have equal access to opportunities. That's part of human life is being fair and equitable, so people can have the basics of humanity, cleanliness and opportunity and justice available to them, whether it's in that community or any other community. And we also recognize that somehow or other Krishna is allowing people to have the opportunity to grow spiritually regardless of their material situation. We can see that in our own lives too. Like we've been more or less advantaged or disadvantaged, but we've always had the opportunity to grow spiritually. So both things are there. But as far as specifically the prison system, as you pointed out, we are sharing these books. I mentioned this before. I have one godbrother who has been initiated by my spiritual teacher, who is in maximum security prison for the rest of his life because he was guilty of a capital crime, not a capital, he's not dead, didn't kill him, but a felony, and he's never going to get out but they let my teacher in to give him a spiritual name and for like half an hour. And thank you, take care. And he's practicing bhakti in his situation. And so that's available, although they're serving a life sentence for murder. So, but absolutely, it's excellent. It's excellent and important service to make bhakti available to anyone and everyone. That's actually a very, very privileged service to take, and it gets a lot of credit with Krishna. He likes to see that. He says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, a sneak preview, somebody who shares his science with others is the most dear to me. So you can do it in the prison system. You can do it in the prison of the material world. Many people are shackled by their own devices. Many people are imprisoned by their own reckless mind. Many people make television the warden of their lives. You know, many people have these burdens. They're not actually behind bars, but they are. And so we can present Bhagavad Gita science to them in one way or another. And that is very much the crying need, I would argue, is spiritual knowledge.
I think one thing that has always been beautiful to me about working in the prison system is it's a captive audience.
That's true.
It's a captive audience.
They got nowhere else to go.
Hit rock bottom.
And they have hit rock bottom, some. Most of them, though, in the women's prison at least. And 90% are there for knowledge.
Yeah. So there's a kind of a situational thing of like,
Yeah.
just like Arjuna, he hit rock bottom in his life. He's like, he thought it could get no worse. So he actually like cracked open and said, okay, Krishna really helped me here. So if your circumstances in life open you up to higher knowledge, they could be argued to be eventually looking back, they could be argued to be for your benefit. But it takes somebody applying themselves to do that.
And then in terms of the preaching, right, it's like knowing your audience. So maybe you wouldn't spend as much time talking about cleanliness, you know, like if they're not able to have that autonomy over that for themselves, right? And so it's also knowing who you're preaching to, speaking to.
But the same verse also says, besides cleanliness, is being equal with whatever comes. So it's like, even if you want to be clean, sometimes the world's going to make it impossible. So then it's like, okay, can you handle that? And so you'll have to deal with that in that world.
Right.
Yeah. Caitlin's got to go. Thank you, Caitlin.
Tanya had her hand up.
Tanya had her hand up. Thank you. Go ahead, Tanya.
So in this, in the verses 8 through 12, when you read through, it hit me when you said, when you were reading, aspiring to live in a solitary place. And I was going to ask what that really meant. But as I had time to think about it, for me, it's been really interesting over the last 3 years since I've been involved with bhakti and therapy in hand, how I've really grown into being comfortable in my own self, like being comfortable alone. I never wanted to be alone. I was born as the fourth child in a very busy family. I've distracted myself with lots of people and stuff around me my entire life. And it became something I was afraid to be alone. And even if I had a moment to be alone, I'd call somebody because I couldn't be alone. But now I don't want to go live in a cave somewhere, but but I love the fact that I like myself enough to be alone now and with my thoughts, and I want more of that.
Good point. Yeah, and Srila Prabhupada elaborates in the purport too that alone also means like away from undesirable association. So let's say your goal in life is to make spiritual advancement. What we find is that devotees are encouraged to associate with other devotees, not to be alone. If you try to practice spiritual life on your own, it's actually not a good idea, because it's good to take some time and go to retreats and stuff on your own. But if you are always on your own, you're not going to get help. You're not going to have support. You're not going to have sangha, which is a fundamental aspect. But that's not outside the realm of being alone, because these are people that are supporting you in your goal. So rather, what Prabhupada focuses on the purport is that, okay, don't take undesirable associations. Like, even if you have to go to the grocery store and get your groceries, and we all kind of have to do that, you're there for a purpose, and you're not mixing with other forms of energy. Maybe there's some music playing on their sound system. And there's always different things going on in the world, but we remain aloof from things that are not supporting us in our goal. Even if we have to like formally at some level associate and deal with it, we maintain our heart is aloof from it to some degree. But from those who are like going to the same place, who have the same goals, who are also spiritually minded, then we open our heart to them. And that's also, it's not contradicting the principle of solitude. It's more like choosing your association, choosing where you open your heart, which is a whole huge topic in and of itself. So much so that it's focused on in one of the verses in the Nectar of Instruction. It's a very fundamental aspect of lifestyle management. How do you, like, as devotees, craft a life where you are choosing how to open up your heart to whom, and like who to like be a little bit aloof from, but just adding a little bit of layer there, that it's not like a completely one-dimensional thing of like I should just always be alone. But what you're saying is true too. Is as people get more mature, they are also happier with themselves. They're okay with themselves. They don't need to fill the space with chatter or people who will like agree with them about things. They're actually all right with who they are. That's a sign of growing up, maturity. Nothing cooler than like a grandparent type 80-year-old person who's just like, they're just based. They're just whatever they are. That's what they are. They've learned to love themselves.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm hearing, is like not needing other people's approval and not needing to like fit in or whatever.
I think of it like giving or taking association.
Yeah.
Right. There's around certain people you want to receive their association, and around others you don't want to receive it, so you give yours.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't take their values on.
Mm-hmm.
Lots there. Wow, it's almost, it's 10 to 8. I think we can pause here. Anything else real quick that anyone wants to reflect or share or ask? Okay. All right, so my request is read the first 12 verses. Purports are optional always, but highly recommended. First 12 verses and translations of the 13th chapter. And in the next 48 hours, share something in the WhatsApp thread. Even if it seems really elementary to you, it helps all of us because it jogs our memories. And thank you so much for your attentive ears and attendance, everyone. And to the devotees listening on YouTube, after the fact, we love you. See you in the ether, and see you next week from Hawaii. We'll continue in chapter 13. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Aibo.
Haribo. Haribo.